She has spent 16 years leading technology teams at prestigious companies such as Slack and Amazon. And she is building an AI-driven marketplace right now to connect founders to coaches that can accelerate their growth. And in her talk, which is called Opportunities for Startups Leveraging AI in 2025, she's going to provide practical strategies for both new founders as well as seasoned entrepreneurs. These insights are going to hit powerfully. Please join me in welcoming Uma to the stage.
Thank you, Alan. Am I audible? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Uma Uppin. I am so happy to be here with you all today. So what if I told you that we're witnessing the greatest democratization of entrepreneurship in history? And it's not happening because of funding or networking, but because of artificial intelligence. And here are some statistics that speak to it. 78% of companies now use AI in at least one of the business functions. And AI market cap is set to grow by 3.7 trillion by 2034. And by the end of this year, 97 million people will be working in AI. And also, 38% of solo founders have no VC backing, which means that they're bootstrapping. And all of this is happening because AI is breaking barriers to entry. We don't need as much technical expertise anymore. Capital investment requirements is very minimal, and team sizes are really reducing. And we're also seeing a shift from Silicon Valley-based innovation to a global distributed entrepreneurship. So where are these opportunities? We can really cluster these opportunities into 4 groups. And I would say the biggest opportunity lies in the application layer. Let's also look at the hardware and cloud layer. So it's more about building, data centers, GPUs, compute infrastructure. And there are many well-known companies which are dominating in this space. The thing with this area is that it requires huge capital investment and also deep technical expertise. So there are companies like NVIDIA, AMD, Intel in the hardware space, which are very dominant. And in cloud, we have AWS, Google, Azure, which have already taken up substantial market space. So VCs generally don't tend to invest in these startups. And the next group is all about foundational models. So we have well-known companies building these large language models, which again need quite a bit of capital investment and also deep expertise. There's a high risk factor to this because we have open source alternatives, and many of these companies are now commoditizing their own LLMs. So the largest opportunity really lies in the application layer. And this is happening because of 2 reasons. LLMs are way more refined now. We have higher performing models. And also, API costs are really falling. So the initial capital investment is really low, and we can build products that are really fast to market. So it's possible to take the existing workflows and build agentic workflows and make them really vertical specific and have very tailored solutions. So I would say this is an exciting place where we can see a lot of startups shining. And next, I want to talk a little bit about what makes successful founders. With AI and having multimodal options, it's very easy to integrate voice, text, um, images, and videos, and really come up with outstanding solutions. But then, not everyone can solve every problem. So it's really important for us to figure out what is a key differentiator and what problem aligns with our values. And this alignment really builds a foundation which then attracts investors, customers, and employees. And a value-aligned team is more likely to persist through challenges and is very resilient. And that leads to building a successful startup. So I want to talk a little bit about how AI assistance is helping shrink engineering cycles. We're seeing massive gains in terms of time. There's at least a 40% reduction in engineering cycles. For some feature buildings, which used to take 15 days, it's only taking 6 days now. And so we're seeing huge gains in terms of time savings. But this is also, and one of the main reasons this is happening is because of agentic AI revolution. There are quite a few companies that have come up with agentic code assistants, like Anthropic has Claude Code, which is able to write production-ready code. GitHub Copilot has evolved not only to write code, but also to do automated code reviews. And also, a company called Cognition is building AI software engineers, which is able to write code, test, debug, and deploy to production. So there's plenty of gains that companies are seeing. There's at least a 60% reduction in cost. Documentation is taking half the time, and code to refactor is taking nearly 2/3 of the time it used to take. But there's a new bottleneck now. So the new bottleneck is getting human feedback. We're able to build and ship features at a much rapid rate, but going back to customers, getting them validated and getting feedback and incorporating is taking time. So companies are facing a new challenge where they have to balance rapid development with meaningful user engagement. And next, I want to talk a little bit about some of the successful companies, what they do. Startups usually slow down not because of lack of execution, but because of lack of clarity. And what does clarity mean? So we talked about identifying the correct problem for us. And then it comes down to really having a good solution and having as much details as possible so that we can map the solution to different pain points. And it's really important when building an AI agentic workflow, because then we can really get down to a task level specific, and then build agents, and then build out the workflow. And also, it's very important to understand the impact and how do we measure impact. So we're able to prioritize this and really solve on the burning problems. And of course, gauging product market fit is very important. It goes without saying. And without clarity, teams, waste a lot of time on misaligned priorities. And leaders experience decision fatigue too. And a lot of opportunities are missed because goals are not clear. So it's really important to gain clarity. And with AI really helping us develop features faster, it's easy to get into a speed trap. And speed without direction leads to, again, wasted resources. Companies rush to scale without understanding, without having clarity, and that only leads to more confusion. And this leads to poor decision making, and often it is seen that it leads to higher customer cost acquisition. Which, again, I want to drive this point home that having clarity is so important, especially now because we have all the tools to build products very quickly, but then having clarity is something that a lot of founders miss, and then they pivot quite a few times to get there. So that was my main thoughts I wanted to share in this presentation. I also put together this last slide as a mini workshop because I do believe that AI will enable founders to will enable a lot of founders to really build and solve for important problems. So I want to take a few minutes, if you're all up to it, to kind of go through these questions. So we have like two questions. The first is really identifying a problem. So I would really like for you to think through a problem that you really, really deeply care. It can be a frustrating experience you've faced often, or an industry challenge that you've observed, or a social issue that really motivates you. Or a professional pain point that you've encountered very often. So let's take a few seconds to see what comes up. Okay, so the second part is really checking if there's value alignment. There are 4 questions to this. Does this problem genuinely matter to you personally? I think if you haven't experienced this problem personally, it's really hard to connect with the pain points and come up with a good solution. So I think this is a really important question. The second is, would you be excited to work on this for at least the next 2 to 3 years? And then, do you have unique insights or experience related to this problem? And does solving this really align with your personal mission? And if you have positive answers for all the 4 questions, you're onto something, and you should really, reflect more and dig deeper and see what you come up with. Because trust me, the way AI is going, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to solve problems that matter to us and have a huge impact on the society. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. And I will pass it on to Alan to introduce our next speaker. Or do you want to?
Time for Q&A.
Okay.
We're open to it, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Very happy to take questions.
Yeah, so does anybody have a question? What I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this mic around, and you can ask your question in the mic. Here's the mic tip. You want to hold it kind of up here? Just talk directly into it. There you are, first question.
This was great. Is there a template that
Make sure you talk into
what you've created?
A template for...
A template to really do a deep dive into this, other than basic questions.
Yeah. You know what? I'm creating a bot just to, gain clarity and just have like this brainstorming with a bot. So connect with me, and then I can share the bot with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Here you are.
Uma, great talk. My only question was back on that slide where you introduced all of your metrics as to how AI is accelerating the development lifecycle.
Yeah.
Do you know where you got those from, or how did you draw those conclusions when you were putting the presentation together?
This is from some of my colleagues in my previous companies. So it's coming from them. So they've inculcated one of these agentic assistants, and they're seeing some huge gains. And also, I did some research on internet, and of course, I used AI too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think you were next. Yeah, we'll get to everybody. Thank you.
Thanks. I was curious, you were talking about clarity being important. So wanted to just, not in a weird way, but like speak more on that. What type of clarity? Is it clarity in vision for where you're going? Is it clarity in here are the requirements for what we're trying to do that you have to be really specific, but just wanted to pull that thread, so to speak, more and hear more on that because I liked where you were going with that. Wanted to hear more.
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's two parts to it. First, identifying the problem. The problem, does it align with you, with your values? I think that's very important, and it's often overlooked. And the second part is really coming up with a solution for all the pain points. What is your solution for each pain point? How are you going to build it? Because that becomes key for you to build each agent in a multi-agent workflow. So each agent can do one task and then give the output to the next agent. So having as much details as you can get will, help you gain more clarity.
Yeah, so back to these numbers, given that these seem to be more anecdotal, would it not be somewhat advisable to point that out on the slide? I mean, there's a very recent study where open source developers, I think 200 people were included, that clearly shows that somebody who knows what they're doing, there was a test group that was using AI and a test group that was not using AI, and the AI people were 20% slower solving basically the same tasks than those people that were not using AI. And so that's a study with a large number of people that's been referenced in a number of articles, including the Register, which goes completely against these anecdotal numbers. So,
yeah, that's definitely possible. Because when you use AI, sometimes you have to go back and check the code, right? So it's definitely possible that the study showed those numbers. But large companies like Anthropic, Perplexity, they've made it mandatory for all of their engineers to use a IDE like Cursor or use their own code agents. So it's become a norm in some of the major tech companies.
Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean it gives me a productivity improvement just because it's a norm.
Is that
Sure.
study using agentic AI or just copy paste?
I would argue that it really depends on how agentic AI is used. My team is trying to go all agentic in its coding, and we're finding that there's some things that does better than others. I'm familiar with the study that you mentioned, and I think it really does depend on the kind of tasks being executed. So I think that the answer is a nuanced one, and it's not an easy yes, go all agentic or don't. It requires a lot of experimentation and testing to see what works. One of the things we found is that if you're trying to build code fast and discardable, there are actually use cases where that makes a lot of sense. Like for instance, if you're building a backend API and you just need a quick and dirty front end to test out your API, or vice versa. If you're trying to build a front end and you just need quick and dirty API stubs that produce some interesting outputs, that's where I think agentic AI can really shine right now. And that answer might change completely in 1 or 2 months.
Great conversation. We have a question back here.
Yeah, this is sort of related towards the same conversation points everyone else has been making. I was just kind of curious if you knew of anything about how much of an issue formal verification of programs that you write with the agentic systems might encumber the production time. So obviously, like you can generate a whole hell of a lot more code using agentic or large language models, but then like depending on the complexity of the code, that probably will make verification extremely difficult. And obviously you can do test cases, but there's a lot of other nuanced things that would make that also challenging. And then I guess the other sort of point is that a lot of these models are trained on like maybe GitHub for the code base. And like I would imagine a lot of production code just doesn't make it to GitHub. So there's probably a generalization problem in terms of the kind of code that the large language models are producing that might not be congruent to production ready code.
Yeah, I definitely think it's, it boils down to defining the specifics. So if you're able to define a task, a very specific task for the agentic, for the agent, then the output is pretty legit and it's, more accurate. But if the scope that's given to the agent is like much larger, then, there's chances of hallucination and you need to do a lot of like test verification.
Sure, a question over here.
Yeah, I just want to make another comment around the bigger question that we all seem to be pointing toward right now, which is, is there a real gain to be made with AI? I think the question is obviously yes, or the answer is obviously yes, but it's a new tool. It's an entirely different way of coding, and dropping a new tool into someone who doesn't know necessarily how to use it means that it is not going to get results right away. There are all sorts of new workflows that are required. There are new metas that are required. There are new ways that tools need to interact. There are new ways that you need to think about how an application actually works in order to get the full use out of the tool. If you dropped a musket into a group of swordsmen, chances are you're not going to get really great results from the musket right away. And that's where we are today with AI.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. So again, it boils down to, really defining the problem, coming down to specifics. And of course, learning how to use AI properly, even for prompt engineering. Writing good prompts is a skill, right? So 100% there with you on learning a new tool and using it so it's more productive.
Would you possibly say, like, we're kind of experiencing the example of your insistence on clarity for those things, like knowing which AI tools we're talking about, what specific domain knowledge, understanding those things really will impact your productivity?
100%. I think gaining clarity in terms of, the problem we want to solve, the solution and the mission is important, but also, the appropriate tools to use also fits into that bucket for sure.
This is more of like a side thing on that. So I'm a middle manager, so I don't do anything. So I go for walks on meetings. And so I'll just like voice to text chat to ChatGPT about an idea. Hey, I'm thinking about this and blah, blah, blah. Here's what I'm thinking. What am I not thinking of? Just like that sort of thing. And voice to text, as you're talking about clarity, that's what I was thinking of. That's been the huge helper for me. Because I ramble, you'll maybe pick up on, and it is good at just that productivity, at least for me, of like clarify what I'm doing. And then when I'm getting to PRDs and that sort of kind of product-y type stuff, it's a lot more clear. And then my team will be like, dude, you missed X, Y, or Z. So if you're saying like very specific things, that's what I've been doing, and it's been helpful. But like I said, I'm middle manager, so I just talk a lot, and it's a helpful 30-minute walk becomes very, very productive for me.
Great, thanks for sharing that.
Are we good for one more question?
Sure.
Okay. Oh, you were next? Oh, right.
Hey, so you talked about this democratization of entrepreneurship, and it seems to me, and I'm sure there's other frameworks, but there's a couple different kind of archetypes of founders, and I think that they run into different challenges. There's the kind of technical software background founders who are trying to break into kind of either industry-specific niches to kind of build out these specific workflows. And then there's also the kind of people who have some of that industry experience who are trying to break into AI to figure out how to build those tools. And I'm curious, especially about that later one, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen with those kinds of founders as they try to build out these platforms, given their industry experience, given some of the challenges that we've been discussing around AI not necessarily making the most production-ready code or the most go-to-market available platforms?
Yeah. So are you talking about industry experienced founders who don't really have technical expertise? So even with some of the large platforms, they offer a lot of non-technical or no-code way of building bots and building agents. And I do see a lot of businesses using them, even for the content creation, social media marketing, and many other functions, right? So, and the scale is like pretty small. But if they want to scale up, they can actually go and hire a much smaller team now, and they're able to really invest a small capital, and they're able to scale in a much bigger way. So that way, AI is really democratizing because you don't need a large capital investment or a team size anymore. Okay, I think those were the questions, and we're out of time. Thank you. I really enjoyed chatting with all of you, and I'll hand it back to Alan for
I appreciate
the next
it.
presentation.
Thank you. A round of applause for Uma.
Thank you. Thanks.